Major General Benjamin Lincoln, born in Hingham, January 1733. Constable, Selectmen, Town Clerk. Participant in the Suffolk Resolve. Elected Captain, Hingham Militia. Took his troops to Boston at Lexington and Concord. Participated in the Provisions War, including the Battle of Grape Island. Was an organizer. Led his troops to the Battle of Saratoga, where he was wounded, walked with a limp for the rest of his life. Second in command to George Washington for the Southern troops. Forced to surrender his troops at Charleston. Denied the honors of war. Was paroled, exchanged, took place in the Battle of Yorktown, where he was given the honors of war in accepting the sword of surrender from Cornwallis's aide, Major General O'Hara. After the war, comes back to Boston, Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Port Collector, called upon again to put down Shays' Rebellion, comes back to Hingham, where he started as a farmer and a brewer, one of the founders of New North Church. Dies here in Hingham, May 1810. Portage Firelocks, full cock, take aim, fire! Portage Firelocks, handle the cartridge, reload, take aim, fire! Portage Firelocks, handle the cartridge, reload, full cock, take aim, fire!
Good morning. I'm Bob Mosher. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Hingham Historical Society and also its treasurer. I'm proud to welcome you here to our Lincoln Day program, a celebration of civic engagement, which this meeting house has always represented. I was in North School in the old shipyard when I realized how unique it was that my great aunt, Aunt Sade, had been alive when Lincoln was president. Aunt Sade is buried out back with her husband, Ensign B. Gardner, who was a sexton here at this meeting house in the 1920s and 1930s. So although I attend church at the end of Main Street, I have also felt a strong connection to this meeting house. I want to thank the Reverend Reed Brown and the congregation of the First Parish for allowing the meeting house to be used, and organist Christopher Nicholson Mann for today's music. Thank you to Andrea Young and the Hingham Historical Commission for their support, and to the Hingham Police for their logistic assistance, and for their leading us to Fountain Square, when we are done with this observation. Thank you to Harbor Media, who is recording this for the people who could not attend. And thank you to the volunteers and staff of the Hingham Historical Society who have arranged the refreshments for you that you are invited to enjoy after Fountain Square. Thank you to our Executive Director, Deidre Anderson, who makes it all look easy, and no matter how difficult it is, and works endlessly to preserve the history of Hingham. Please stand for our opening anthem, America.
You may be seated. Bob said we allow the use of our meeting house for this occasion. It's more than allow. Thank you for your thanks. We are pleased and delighted once again to be the host site for Lincoln Day ceremonies. We're all here partly because we're interested in history, so I would remind us before my invocation that we are on sacred ground that was sacred because all the land was sacred to those peoples, Wampanoag, Massachusetts, and others who lived here for generations upon generations before European settlement. And I'd remind us that we're in a sacred house, not because it was made so by any ritual, but because of the generations of those who have worshiped here, remembered here, celebrated here, voted and argued here over the generations since it was built in 1681. And so may we share a moment of prayer. God of many names, great Spirit, source of life and of love, in our hearts and in our lives, we know that parishioners and citizens alike have gathered under these beams for 3 centuries, gathered in times of trial, struggle, or war, gathered in times of peace and prosperity, gathered for purposes spiritual or civic, for comfort and for inspiration, to remember or to celebrate. This day, as we honor the 2 Lincolns, may we be inspired by their example, as well as by the example of those whose names are not in the history books, but those women and men who've also labored for justice and right, for freedom and democracy and peace. May we be inspired to do our part as citizens, as human beings who share this nation and who share this earth to create a future of greater peace, justice, and ecological sustainability for all. May it be so. Amen.
Each year, the Hingham Historical Society organizes an 8th grade essay contest to which students are asked to reflect on a quotation attributed to Abraham Lincoln. First, our thanks to those who assisted in this contest: Hingham Public Schools Social Studies Director Andy Huey and the 8th grade U.S. history teachers, and our volunteer judges, Andy Hertig and Pam Oppadiciano, and Norma Atkinson. The winner of this year's contest are Amelia Ray Creed, Beatrix Moore, and Katie McLean. Here to offer a prayer for the future are Beatrix Moore and Katie McLean.
We come together today in thanksgiving for the many blessings we enjoy in this free land, seeking guidance in the difficulties of the present, yet confident that the future holds and will bestow its own abundant possibilities.
We are mindful of the faith and dedication of those in the past who dreamt great dreams, saw a vision of a nation as yet unimagined, and gave themselves in the struggle to bring into reality what was and is the new order of ages. May our remembrance of Benjamin and Abraham Lincoln enliven our endeavor to maintain this new order, and achieved in the revolution that saw its birth, and in the conflict that preserved this, our unique union of states in a new birth of freedom.
May this be our prayer, that our land be blessed with honest industry, sound learning, and high ideals. Save us, Lord, from violence, discord, and confusion, and support us as we seek to fashion into one united people the multitude brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues.
May our concern for and remembrance of the things of the past lead us not merely to look back, but to the promise of the future and its possibilities. May we in our time be searchers and adventurers, like those to whom we pay our tribute, and for whose accomplishments we give thanks today. Amen.
Please stand for the presentation of colors and the Pledge of Allegiance. Left. Right.
I pledge allegiance
Present.
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ready? Front. Okay. Color guard. Right face. Forward. March. Retire the colors.
I would like to take a moment to recognize some of the participants in today's celebration. The Society of Cincinnati, Massachusetts chapter. The Society of Cincinnati is a non-hereditary order of the Officers of the American Revolution. Benjamin Lincoln was one of the founders of the society and was the first president of the Massachusetts chapter. The Military Order of the Loyal Legion, Massachusetts Commandery. The Military Order of the Loyal Legion was formed in the immediate aftermath of President Lincoln's assassination, and today fosters remembrance and awareness of our 16th president. The Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company is the oldest chartered military organization in North America, created by the General Court in 1637. Today, its charge is to preserve our historical and patriotic traditions. In 1788, Benjamin Lincoln was elected the captain of the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company. The 22nd Massachusetts Voluntary Infantry, Inc. is a Civil War reenactment group that portrays Company D of the 22nd Regiment, Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry. Established in 1861, the Massachusetts 22nd became part of the Army of the Potomac and participated in most of the important battles in the Eastern Theater during the Civil War. The United States Sanitary Commission, Boston branch, also represented, was an arm of the relief agency founded in 1861 to provide nursing and support for sick and wounded Union soldiers. Our own Hingham Militia, the 2nd Suffolk Regiment, founded in 1637 and reactivated in 1974. The Hingham Militia is active in promoting local history through the ceremonial and educational appearances. A proclamation of Lincoln Day. Thank you to the Selectmen Mary Paula and John Fisher for their participation today. Thank you to Joan Messina and Patrick O'Connor, our representatives in the General Court. Today, our Selectmen will read a proclamation for Lincoln Day.
Before I read the proclamation, I just want to note recent history. Selectman Paul Healy is here, and for years he has read the proclamation, and I stand humbly in his presence right now. The Town of Hingham, Massachusetts Proclamation. Whereas the town of Hingham was settled in 1635 by a small band of Puritan pilgrims, many of whom came from Hingham, England, and environs. And whereas among the descendants of those original settlers were two famous American public figures who shared the common family name Lincoln, as well as a common heritage. And whereas it is a long-standing Hingham tradition to honor and celebrate their birthdays, General Benjamin Lincoln, a lifelong Hingham citizen and a hero of the American Revolution, and Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president and the towering figure of the Civil War. And whereas we honor and celebrate the lives and deeds of the two Lincolns because of the indelible legacy of community building and preservation that they have left for us. And whereas in this year, 2020, we pay special honor to 4 centuries of our citizens, those famous like Benjamin Lincoln and Abraham Lincoln, and those unknown to history, who worked myriad ways to build and sustain this wonderful community of Hingham and the broader communities of state and nation. And whereas the preservation of community is a perpetual task in which each generation must fully participate. Now, therefore, we, the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Hingham, do hereby officially proclaim Saturday, February 15, 2020, Lincoln Day. We urge also that as many citizens as possible join us at Old Ship Meeting House on Saturday, February 15, 2020 at 11 a.m. for patriotic ceremony of celebration. Finally, we urge each citizen to take to heart the examples of the two Lincolns and those of 4 centuries of Hingham citizens, and we urge each citizen to participate in some concrete way in the strengthening and preservation of this community of Hingham and the broader communities of state and nation for the generations which will succeed us. Given under our hands and seal of Hingham this 11th day of February 2020, signed by Karen A. Johnson, Chairman, Mary M. Power, and Joseph M. Fisher, Board of Selectmen, Town of Hingham.
And now our Lincoln Day speaker is Paula Baga. Paula is president of the Hingham Historical Society.
Thank you all for being a part of our Lincoln Day today. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about my new favorite subject, Major General Benjamin Lincoln. I'm not going to focus on General Lincoln's Revolutionary War service, which is well documented, although perhaps not as widely appreciated as that of some of his contemporaries, to whom history has paid more attention. Henry Knox, the Marquis de Lafayette, even Benedict Arnold. Rather, I want to focus on the man that Hingham knew, both before and after the war, his politics, his character traits, what he took from and gave to his native town. Benjamin Lincoln was born in January 1733 in what we now call the Benjamin Lincoln House, at the corner of North Street and Broad Cove Street, which was later renamed Lincoln Street in the General's honor. He was the fourth Benjamin Lincoln to live in the house at 181 North Street. He and his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all shared the name. Benjamin's branch of the Lincoln family arrived in the person of Thomas the Cooper Lincoln in 1636 and prospered. Benjamin's father, Benjamin III, or Colonel Lincoln, owing to his rank in the militia, owned farmlands and a malt house and held multiple town positions, including that of town clerk, like his father before him, and like his son, the general, after him. As the son who would carry on his father's farming and business pursuits, Benjamin received only what we hear it was a good common education, while his brother Bella attended Harvard College and medical school in Scotland to prepare for a profession. But Benjamin did get a significant leg up in local affairs owing to his family's influence. He was elected town constable at age 21, town clerk at age 23. By his mid-30s, he was both a selectman and a deacon of Hingham's first parish, responsible for this meeting house where we are today. He followed his father into the militia, the 2nd Suffolk Regiment. Benjamin benefited from his family's success in another way. Although a farmer and a tradesman, he was able to marry at the age of 24, quite young at the time. He married Mary Cushing of Pembroke in January 1756 and had 11 children, 6 of whom lived to adulthood. His father, as a member of the Governor's Council, had at least formal ties to the crown. But Benjamin entered the Revolutionary period with a decided patriot inclination. In 1770, town meeting voted to approve the non-importation resolutions of the Boston merchants and to institute its own boycott of British goods. It further voted that the town clerk should transmit that vote to the Boston merchants. When Lincoln did so, he added a note: "I cheerfully comply with the above order." In 1774, town meeting sent Lincoln to the General Court. At around the same time, Royal Governor Thomas Gage dissolved the body. When it reconstituted itself as the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, the colony's rebel government, Lincoln's influence increased swiftly. He was appointed its secretary, then its commissary, overseeing militia organization and supply, and then the acting president. In 1776, he was named a major general of the Massachusetts militia and less than a year later was commissioned into the Continental Army at the same rank. This rapid rise appears to have been fueled by two character traits, which stood Lincoln in good stead throughout his career. First, intelligence and a talent for organization. Benjamin Lincoln was a logistics guy centuries before that became a career. He came to Washington's notice during the siege of Boston. He kept supply lines open and the militia moving. This was not flashy work, and his colleague, General Henry Knox, got history's attention when he brought the cannons to Dorchester Heights. But Benjamin Lincoln's work was indispensable nonetheless. Second, Lincoln's unassuming manner and militia background allowed him to gain and retain the loyalty of the militiamen who fought alongside the Continental regulars throughout the war. These were farmers like himself who had signed on to the cause, but were not and did not view themselves as professional soldiers. And they trusted him and were loyal to him. When Lincoln was made a major general in the Continental Army, he leapfrogged ahead of Benedict Arnold, a brigadier general. Arnold considered it an insult that he had been beaten out by an officer of the militia. Yet the loyalty of the militias played a great role in Washington's decision to promote Lincoln and send him first to Saratoga in 1777 and then to Charleston in 1778. And this reminds me of a story that we just learned last week from one of the historians at Saratoga National Park, which says something about unassuming nature and character. Both Lincoln and Benedict Arnold were wounded at the Battle of Saratoga. Lincoln's ankle was shattered by a musket ball, and his leg was never right again. The physician at the Albany Hospital, where both generals were taken, commented in his papers not only about Lincoln's disposition, but noted that General Arnold complained a great deal more than General Lincoln, although Lincoln's injuries were far worse. Lincoln's 4 years with the Continental Army ended at Yorktown in 1781, where he famously, in Hingham at least, accepted the sword of surrender. But Yorktown did not end the war. That came only with the Treaty of Paris 2 years later. During those 2 years, Lincoln served as the Secretary of War, reporting to the Continental Congress under the Articles of Confederation. During those 2 years, Lincoln directed the military under a national government that did not, quote, provide for the common defense, as the Constitution later would, and did not enjoy any power to tax so as to pay revolutionary soldiers what was in some cases years of back pay. Added to his experience during the war, this administrative position helped form Lincoln's views about the importance of a strong federal government. Lincoln came out of the war a staunch Federalist and a supporter of the federal Constitution. And in October 1783, the month after the Treaty of Paris was signed, Lincoln left the War Office and returned to Hingham. The men who fought the American Revolution and wrote its early histories valued what they called Republican, small r, ideals of public virtue, noble simplicity, modesty of demeanor, and the placing of the public good before private gain. This was contrasted with the imperial values of the British Empire. They looked for inspiration in the stories of the Roman Republic and its heroes and found the general Cincinnatus, a farmer renowned for putting down his plow to take up arms to save the Republic, and the peace won, eschewing rank and power to return to his plow. A French nobleman who met George Washington at Mount Vernon in 1788 wrote, "You have often heard him compared to Cincinnatus. The comparison is doubtless just. The celebrated general is nothing more at present than a good farmer, constantly occupied in the care of his farm." That same conceit is unmistakably evident in a letter by a Dutch nobleman who visited Benjamin Lincoln in Hingham in 1783. He wrote, "Imagine the effect on me of his noble simplicity when during the evening, sitting in front of the fire, Lincoln spoke to us, smiling all the while, and saying, 'I have lived here 20 years after my marriage, and I never dreamed of war. Here is my place, and here is Mrs. Lincoln's, and it's here we pass our evenings talking together.'" This quote is courtesy of David Matern's biography of Benjamin Lincoln, which I commend to anyone who's interested in learning more about the general's life. Lincoln's return to Republican simplicity was tested by the sad situation 8 years of military service had left his finances in. Like many other of the Continental officers, he struggled financially. He had been paid with Continental securities that were worth far less than their face value. He invested in real estate in Maine, tended to agricultural pursuits in Hingham, built ships and embarked upon trade, and operated a flour mill at the Weir River, working with his son Theodore, who moved to Maine, and his son Martin, who saw to the farm and local business. But an already difficult financial system was made worse by a good friend, General Henry Knox, and a political foe, John Hancock. Knox lived far beyond his means, and Lincoln had guaranteed tens of thousands of dollars of Knox's debts. When Knox defaulted, Lincoln was held responsible. In 1788, after Lincoln was elected lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth, Hancock, the governor, and from the other political party, the Republicans, withheld the honorary military appointment, captain of the fort on Castle Island, that provided the lieutenant governor's pay. By the time George Washington was inaugurated in 1789, Lincoln's financial situation was precarious, and he asked Washington for an appointment to the new federal government. Washington named him the first collector of the Port of Boston, a position he held through the Washington, Adams, and early Jefferson administrations, maintaining an active correspondence with those presidents and cabinet officials such as Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, Henry Knox, Albert Gallatin. Here in Hingham during this period, the general oversaw the education of around a dozen sons of former political and military colleagues from Philadelphia, Virginia, and further south, who had been sent north under General Lincoln's care to prepare for Harvard. At the request of his old friend, Madam Sarah Derby, he agreed to be one of the founding trustees of the school she was endowing, Derby Academy. In 1806, there was a schism in the congregation of this church, which both sides, in lengthy pamphlets, swore had nothing to do with the political divisions between the Federalists and the Republicans, but of course, almost certainly did have everything to do with that. And General Lincoln joined with the other local Federalists to form Hingham's third parish, now New North Church. In his retirement as a member of the Academy of Arts and Sciences, Lincoln wrote and reviewed articles on natural history and horticulture. Benjamin Lincoln died in May 1810 and was buried in the graveyard behind this meeting house, although his funeral services were held at his new church, Third Parish, across the street from his home on Lincoln Street. At his funeral, the Reverend Henry Codman said that Lincoln's life was, quote, "a remarkable instance of a man's rising to great and deserved eminence with few and ordinary advantages." To quote biographer Matern's response to these words, "That it certainly was. In a short revolutionary period, men and women created a Republican world that demanded not extraordinary talents necessarily, but lives dedicated to public virtue. Many of them, like Lincoln, rose to that challenge. Yet few could claim to have striven harder for a longer time and under more trying circumstances than Lincoln. The source of Lincoln's extraordinary exertions on behalf of his fellow revolutionaries lay in his New England upbringing, his family, his community, and his faith. His understanding of the world and his place in it were shaped by the provincial world of Hingham, a world in which a man's worth and independence were tied to his land and his ability, by frugality, industry, and self-denial, to wrest a living from the stony New England soil. General Lincoln appears to have agreed with what David Mattern said about Hingham and its intangible advantages, because in a 1790 letter to the Hingham Selectmen, written as he headed to Boston to serve as the customs collector, Benjamin Lincoln wrote, "There was never a moment in my life when I was not made happy on the reflection that I was born in the town of Hingham." So now we're going to hear a reading of one of Benjamin Lincoln's letters home to Hingham, and I wanted to just provide a little bit of context and an introduction to the reader. As I said, Benjamin Lincoln was wounded at Saratoga when his ankle was shattered by a musket ball. After spending time in an Albany hospital where he did not complain, he was brought home to Hingham on a sled where he had a lengthy recuperation. In the summer of 1778, he was well enough to rejoin General Washington in New York and was destined to be sent to South Carolina to undertake the command of the Southern Division of the Continental Army, although he did not know that yet. The letter you will hear was written on July 28, 1778, as Lincoln is en route to New York. His wife, Mary, was recovering from smallpox. His eldest son, Benjamin Jr., was 22 and away from home, studying the law. 6 children were at home. Molly, age 20, Elizabeth, 19, Sarah, 17, Theodore, 15, Martin, 9, and Hannah, 5. Molly, the oldest daughter, who is referenced in the letter, was intellectually disabled and lived with her parents for her adult life. Rose Woodward transcribed this letter, found among family correspondence. Rose is a 5 times great-grandchild of Benjamin and Mary Lincoln. With her husband, Charles, she has lived in the Benjamin Lincoln house since 1998. Rosie?
I have the honor of reading a letter that Benjamin Lincoln wrote to his children. Louder? Is that better? My children. This is July 28, 1778. My children, the ill health of some of you, joined to my great hurry, prevented my making some general observations to your future conduct before I left home, some of which are of the greatest importance. In the first place, you will never forget your God, the duty you owe to him as your creator, preserver, and best benefactor. The duty you owe to your neighbor and to yourselves, you will learn from divine revelation, which you will attentively study, and the example of our dear Redeemer. I must mention to you the peculiar state of your mother, whose cares and burdens are greatly increased by my absence. I need not urge, I am sure your own feelings will always suggest to you the propriety of your lessening her burdens, her cares, lightening her burden, and treating her with every mark of tenderness, duty, and respect. Never wound her by doing a wrong action. You may safely confide in her advice. I must, in the next place, recommend to your constant notice your sister Molly. Consider who made you to differ. You owe her every attention, Make her life as happy as in your power. Some are made strong to bear the infirmities of the weak. You will love each other. Those of you who are grown up will counsel those who are not. Never set an ill example before the little ones. Encourage them to every act of goodness, charity, and benevolence by precept and example. As our happiness is connected with the happiness of those about you, always watch over yourselves. Let your deportment at all times be such, if possible, that even the malicious shall be constrained to acknowledge its fitness. I am in haste, but must close, but cannot do it without saying again, remember your God, love your fellow creatures, and injure no person. I am, with every wish for your present and future happiness, your affectionate father, Benjamin Lincoln. Thank you.
That's simply beautiful, Rosie. Thank you. Our final hymn, printed on the back of our programs, America the Beautiful. We will invite all, as you are able, in body or spirit, to rise for the singing. inspired by Benjamin Lincoln's life and by all lives that have been dedicated to public virtue, dedicated to the public good, may we, in our tumultuous political times, so dedicate ourselves to private and public virtue and to the public good in whatever ways we may each serve. May we each do our part, however small it may seem, to creating a world of more justice for all, whatever background, whatever color, whatever country of origin, creating a world of greater peace and friendliness to children, to all creatures on this earth we share. May it be so. May we, too, resolve to live lives of public virtue, public, resolved to the public good. So may it be. Amen. Go in peace. May the Spirit of God be with you.